Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. I'm Ben Schneider, and with me is Matthew Bro and Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. We invite everybody to comment with your opinions and questions in the chat room. Consider investing in the Grid Network. If you like what you see tonight, you can join our Patreon. Join Colin, Mark, Deshelle, and Robin in investing every month in this network. Our newest Patreon supporter, David, as well. We'll read your name at the beginning and end of each episode. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, visit Buy Me a Coffee. The link to that is in the video description. Thank you again to everybody who bought us coffees on our pre-race show this morning. The 65th running of the Daytona 500 is in the books. We saw an action-packed race in moments that left fans holding their breaths. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. escaped the mayhem and won the Great American Race for JTG Daugherty Racing. And how about Cleveland Cavaliers legend Brad Daugherty, a co-owner of JTG, becoming a Daytona 500 winning car owner? And it happened in February, Black History Month. Thank you, Casey. I see you in the chat as well. Kobe, I'll hand it over to you as we begin to recap the race.
Yeah, that was a great moment there for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., especially Brad Daugherty. And coming straight from Daytona International Speedway, NASCAR confirms that Brad Daugherty is the first Black team owner to win the Daytona 500. And also his co-owner, Checker, is the first female co-owner to win the Daytona 500 as well, making some history in the 65th running of the Great American Race. And for the 12th time, the Daytona 500 went over the scheduled distance of 500 miles, a total of 212 laps today, the longest mileage-wise in the history of this event. And for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., he had just enough field to win the race with the multiple overtimes, but he unfortunately didn't have enough to do a burnout. And started with you, Ben. After 3 lackluster years, his last win coming in 2017, can this boost the single-car team to being a weekly contender, or do we need to pump the brakes since, this is a super speedway race?
Well, let's pump the brakes just a little bit, but I do think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has improved steadily over the years. I think he's gotten more out of that JTG Daugherty car than anybody has, in the history of that team relative to, maybe you can make an argument for AJ Allmendinger in 2014. They had a solid year, obviously making the playoffs with that win at Watkins Glen. But, you compare, where he was in 2017, 2018 with that team to where he is now with Colleague and this career revival he's had, an Xfinity now back in Cup with that team. It's been a struggle for JTG the last several years here. So this is certainly going to be a huge momentum boost for them, a huge financial boost for them as well with the purse from winning this big race. And for Stenhouse too, I think this obviously, momentum wise, morale wise is going to lift him up a little bit. I know he's had some rough years as well. Roush obviously have struggled from where they were, at their peak in the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s. It's unfortunate how it worked out because he won his 2 Xfinity championships and then joined the team kind of right as they were, beginning their decline there. So, we'll have to wait and see. Stenhouse has had some runs in that 47 car that, have surprised me at times, and it hasn't always been on these super speedway tracks. So, I think there is a good chance that they can use this and, build some momentum from it. Maybe not become a weekly contender for race wins or a championship, but I would not put it past them to get out of the first round of the playoffs. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Just, one thing, we're talking about 2-time Nationwide Series champion and 2013 Cup Series Rookie of the Year, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. here. So it's not like he's a lackluster driver by any stretch of the imagination. Not many people can say they were Rookie of the Year, 2-time champion in any series for that matter. And then now Daytona 500 champion added to the resume. But I agree. I think we have to pump the brakes. Awesome. I mean, this couldn't have happened to a better team that finished in the top 15, to be honest with you, with all the single car. This is a single car team. A lot of people were upset that they chose Stenhouse Jr. over Preece because Preece was the better driver. Well, now Stenhouse Jr. has 3 total wins and a Daytona 500 win. So I think it's just awesome effort from JTG Daugherty all around for this. I don't think they're going to be like a weekly contender because unfortunately we've seen from these Daytona 500 winners sent for the past maybe 7 years, they don't really win after this for the rest of the season. And we saw Michael McDowell as just one who kind of shocked the world when he won the 500. This playoff run was just not it. It just wasn't there. You could tell he was going to be 16th in playoffs from the moment he crossed the start-finish line after Daytona 500, which was a very unfortunate thing for him too. But I think Stenhouse, this got to give him confidence boost, especially with the purse, like Ben had mentioned. This is some money that this team definitely needed, and I'm very you got to be very happy for them. Like I said, though, I don't think that they're going to be a weekly contender, but maybe they'll have a run like McDowell did when he won his 500, had all those top 10 finishes to start the season. So, hey, maybe we can see it out of Ricky Stenhouse Jr. It's not like he's a bad driver, because he really isn't. Not many people have done what he has done.
Yeah, Matthew, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., JTG Daugherty Racing, this entire 4017. I think it's going to be a great shot in the arm for them, because now they're going to be in the playoffs, and they're going to be able to go race for a championship. So now they don't have to stress about, try to win at Talladega, try to win at Atlanta, try to win at the regular season finale at Daytona as well. So now they can just focus on making their cars better throughout the season and try to see if they can potentially advance out of the round of 12. And right now, it's very early after just 1 points race. People already penciling in Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is going to be one of my first 4 out with in the round of at the end of the round of 16. That's what people are probably going to be thinking. So they're going to want to prove those people wrong and continue that steady improvement that Ben has mentioned. I agree with you, Matt. I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. doesn't get all of the respect that he deserves for being a race car driver and for all that he's accomplished in his career so far. I think it's the aggressive moves we typically see him make on these super speedways, which turn fans off from him, his competitors as well. But actually, you saw some drivers going to Victor Land to congratulate him. They were really happy for Ricky to be able to get this done. Really remarkable. And as you were saying, not everybody can say they won the Daytona 500. I believe we have some comments in the chat room to catch up on. Dima said, what a race for an overtime finish in the 2023 Daytona 500. And Adam Limmery says that was a crazy Daytona 500. What a way to kick off NASCAR's diamond anniversary. And then Adam also says that Brad Daugherty can say he beat Michael Jordan in the Daytona 500. And yep, and that's one thing that Michael Jordan did not win, surprisingly. And Casey Campbell says also the 47 team is in the playoff. Yep, get the race for a championship. And also I believe that there was something else that Casey is talking about here. You said that JTG represents the first African-American owner and woman owner to win the Daytona 500. Yeah, Casey actually mentioned that towards the very beginning of the show. So once again, congratulations to Jody Geschecter and Brad Daugherty on such a historic accomplishment. And
NASCAR Man actually had a great tweet as well of Brad Daugherty dunking on Michael Jordan when he tweeted out that stat as well. So, of course, 23XI still trying to win their first 500. They've only been going at it for a few years, but a great moment for Brad Daugherty as well as the Geschecter family.
Yeah, definitely. And the biggest moment of Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s race was the choose rule towards the very end, the second to last restart. He went from 7th to the lead. He capitalized on a weak restart by both RCR drivers, Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon. We saw some surprises with the choose rule being used for the first time on a super speedway, including Kyle Busch choosing the outside and Austin Dillon on the inside. Matthew, do you believe bringing the choose rule into super speedway racing was the correct call by NASCAR?
I think definitely, because it gives you more of a, I guess definitely for an entertainment base, right? I mean, as fans, as media people, we just want to see it just go very well. But as fans, you want to see that excitement. And nothing was more exciting than seeing Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski pretty much dominate the majority of this race by pushing each other. Then when the Toyotas were pushing each other, it was at a time where out of the 7 in the race, 6 of them were lined up together. Then, unfortunately, one of them, there was a huge momentum which sent one of them into the wall, which kind of ruined Toyota's run, except for Christopher Bell. But I definitely think this is a great idea by NASCAR to put the choose rule in super speedway racing. It's just great for entertainment factor too. It allows less of a risk to see somebody who's like, oh, I'm in 3rd, but my teammates are actually inside of me. I'm just going to cut across. No, you can choose now to line up with your teammates. And I think something we saw that was interesting was we all kind of had that feeling when Austin Dillon went inside that Kyle Busch was going to go up in front of him. But initially our reaction was like, wow, they're teammates and they're not going to push each other. But then that happened, and then it all went downhill from there for Richard Childress Racing, despite being such a great a great threat this entire start of the NASCAR season with the clash, with the duels, all of that stuff. But to answer your short question and a long answer, I think it's definitely the correct call. And I'm excited to see what we're going to see with Atlanta, Talladega, and other super speedway races down the road.
Yeah, you know me, I'm all about consistency, and I'm also as much of a traditionalist as they come. So a couple of points here. I've always found it silly that we have a rule at some tracks or most tracks in the sport, but not all tracks. So I guess for consistency purposes, I'm happy to see the choose rule at the super speedways. But like I said, I'm also a traditionalist. I didn't see anything wrong with having the lead lap cars on the outside and the lap down cars on the inside, and then a single file restart with 10 to go. I know, we're never going to go back to those days, but I just think double file restarts, it was getting a little chaotic and even gimmicky at certain tracks. Like you remember, at Bristol, for a long time, it was actually an advantage to be in the outside lane, even though only the leader would get to choose which lane they started in. So you had guys like intentionally slowing down right before the exit of pit road. I think putting it in the hands of the drivers to be able to choose which lane they start in, if we're going to do double file restarts, I think that's a good thing. And especially here at the super speedways as well, it allows drivers to, team up and work with each other and choose, who their drafting partner is going to be. I did think it was a little bit of a surprise that RCR chose to lock out the front row rather than lining up, directly Austin Dillon behind Kyle Busch, so that they didn't have to do the crossover and could have gotten started right away. Who knows if that would have made a difference or not? I understand what they were trying to do. But that's, I think you put it in the hands of the drivers. Sometimes we're going to see surprises like that, and I guess that was the case today. But I do think it's good to have consistency. I'm glad that we have this rule across the board now. Casey Campbell also mentions first win for Chevrolet in the Daytona 500 since 2018. I think we're going to get to some recent winners on a future topic here, but I guess Hamlin in 19 and 20, and then Ford's the last couple of years with McDowell and Austin Cindric. So great momentum boost for Chevrolet as well.
Yeah, and you're looking at the choose rule that they actually have it in short track racing all across the country. So I guess it's about time they would bring it up to NASCAR and vice versa. Some short tracks have actually debuted a playoff format now, so I guess they get that from NASCAR. So I guess NASCAR takes the choose rule from the short tracks, and they take the playoff format from NASCAR. So I guess in that situation, both sides consider themselves winners. But the choose rule certainly makes things really interesting, especially on certain tracks. Like you were mentioning, Ben, in the past, it was always an advantage to restart on the outside lane at Bristol. Some tracks on the restart, the outside works better, and the bottom lane works better on other racetracks. So the choose rule, it can definitely shake it up. And if you're like, say, in seventh place, like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was, if the top line at a certain track is working well on the restarts and everybody's going up there, it'd be like, why not? I'm gonna go to the inside. I'm gonna start on the front row and see if I can potentially steal a win here. And it adds to the excitement factor and all of that. As you said, Ben, now we have more consistency now with the choose rule added to super speedways. It certainly made things interesting today, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more interesting things with this choose rule in the future. I just know on the short tracks, they don't call it the choose rule. They call it the choose cone. They actually bring out a cone and put out on the track, but NASCAR decided to just paint an orange box.
Yeah, and I definitely can agree with that, Kobe, too. I'm glad that they have the spot and not an actual cone because it'd probably get run over by the way that things have been going. But stage one today went caution-free, which I felt like was quite surprising. And then stage two was looking caution-free until an 8-car crash and a commercial. But we'll discuss that after. But this set up a quick dash to finish the second stage. Tyler Reddick took a hard hit in his debut with 23.11. He said he was okay. It did look pretty difficult as he finished 39th. And then other guys like Chase Elliott and Eric Jones were out of the race after this crash too. Two Chevrolets that had a lot of speed going into the race. And so I'll start with you for this one, Kobe. For the few drivers that were out early for the race, do they have a different approach since they have scored just a few points in Daytona?
First, here's a quick word from Duracell. Just kidding, but to answer your question, Matthew, I don't think you're going to approach it really that differently in the races in this early portion of the season, because it's just one race, and if you have one bad race, it's not the end of the world. You can easily go out there, get a great points day, collect points in stage one, stage two, and get a good finish in the top 10, and you're going to be right in the thick of things. Definitely don't want to get into a slump, having bad finish after bad finish, because then team morale is going to start to go down, and drivers going to really start to get frustrated. I just think if you're if you're a driver who didn't have a good points day at Daytona, it's honestly nothing to worry about. It's a crapshoot on these races. A lot of luck is involved. You may get caught up in a wreck, you may not. So hey, if you didn't have a good day, just put an X by Daytona and then just move on.
Now, before I answer, I need to try my Coke Zero Sugar first. I guess that'll be my commercial reference for this show. I think if you saw me on Twitter throughout the race, you know how I feel about the commercials that we saw on Fox today. So we'll just leave it at that, and we'll talk about the actual racing that we did see, although we didn't see as much of it as I would have liked. Sorry, I actually forgot the question. You were going off so much about the commercials. Drivers that scored points, I guess. Yes. I know Boyer was talking about this in the booth. I guess, obviously everybody wants to win the Daytona 500. But I talked about this on the pre-race show actually as well. How often do we talk about drivers, missing the cut line by 1 point or not having enough playoff points to get to the next round? I mean, every point counts the same when it comes time for the cutoff for the playoff races. So I think that the drivers that did pick up a few stage points today or finished higher in the running order towards the end of the race, that could come into play an advantage when we come back here in August, or maybe it won't. We'll just have to wait and see. It's obviously a very long regular season. We got 25 more races to settle it. That's a lot of opportunities for things to go right and for things to go wrong, but it could be the difference. We'll just have to wait and see.
Definitely. And last commercial joke out of me, I promise. Actually, I can't. I'm going to lie. It's definitely going to come. I was waiting for the Whopper. That didn't come up. It was so much Coke Zero. Crazy. It's a good beverage, by the way. Free sponsorship from Grid Network with Coke Zero. I'm sorry about that. But I think when it comes for points, I like Ben, you just said 20, there's still 25 regular season races to go. And a lot of people don't realize, I think since it's new, but the Daytona duels actually count for 10 points for each winner, and it goes to 10th place earning 1, so on and so forth. So despite Ricky Stenhouse Jr. winning the Daytona 500 today, and if you don't count the win in you're in, he's still third in points. So Logano's technically first in points, Chris Buescher is second. But if you look at notable guys who are not in the playoffs, technically Travis Pastrana would be the 16th driver in the playoffs. He hasn't declared for cup points. I don't think he will. I'd probably bet a lot of money that he won't. But there's notable guys like Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, Kyle Busch, Ty Gibbs, Chase Elliott, just reading down the list, Austin Dillon, Chase Briscoe, Eric Jones, Tyler Reddick. All those guys would not be in the playoffs right now. So clearly one race does not matter until it's the last race at Daytona. But to answer that question, I don't think they drive any differently. I think some of the guys like Cody Ware, for example, who finished in the top 15, probably isn't going to be as aggressive because usually super speedways is when he's up front, but unfortunately with the equipment, he's usually towards the back of the race. So I don't think, just to answer the question before I move on to the next point that we're going to discuss, I don't really think it's going to have a different approach for anyone. And especially somebody who's not going to have a different approach is Joey Logano and Christopher Bell. Both of them made the championship. Both of them sit very high up in the standings, and they finished second and third in the Daytona 500 today. And then also Alex Bowman, who was the pole sitter, had a pretty quiet day, and he still finished fifth. I was talking all that junk about Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson about Daytona and how they're not going to do it. So I sincerely apologize. If the NASCAR Cold Takes found that video, I would be getting blasted on Twitter right now about what I was dissing Alex Bowman. But just to continue and be a little more serious now, I apologize. But everyone else behind was caught up in the big one at least once in this race. So everyone from fifth and behind. Allmendinger was sixth when he was a lap down early in the race. I remember Ryan Blaney wasn't too happy about his move to stay on the lead lap. Daniel Suarez, who brought out the last caution in regulation, was seventh. Blaney somehow finished eighth, and despite being in the big one, barely had a car. Ross Chastain, full throttle throughout a wreck, involved in a crash, still finished ninth. And Riley Herbst, driving the Sunny D Rick Ware Racing Ford, rounded out the top 10. I think that's a very impressive effort, considering he started way back in 30-something. Where was it? Riley Herbst started 38th. So the incredible effort out of Rick Ware Racing and Riley Herbst. So I'm going to start with you, Ben. Sorry for taking so long, guys. But which drivers out of the top 10 surprised you the most?
No worries, Matthew. I was surprised we didn't see a Burger King ad myself, because we had all the stuff going back and forth between McDonald's and Wendy, Bubba Wallace versus Noah Gragson. I guess we need BK Racing to come back. Then we'd have all three of them. But in terms of the drivers in the top 10, I think it's got to be Riley Herbst. Rick Ware Racing always seems to find a way to squeak a top 10 finish out of these Daytona races, and we did it again with Riley Herbst today. That's got to be you want to talk about a momentum boost. Riley Herbst coming out with a top 10 in the Daytona 500. I think that's going to be huge for him moving forward in his Xfinity side of things, and for Rick Ware Racing as well. Anytime you can, come away with a good result for a team like that, to be able to say they got a top 10. I mean, look at Travis Pastrana up there as well. He almost got a top 10 in the Daytona 500. So great to see some of those names up there. Not necessarily avoid the carnage, because I know Pastrana was involved in it, but to avoid enough of it to be in position to finish the race and be up there contending for top 10s and top 5s, even if they come up short of the win. It's still a great day for them. Casey Campbell saying good day for Riley Herbst today after spinning earlier in the day. And that's right. He had that, spin coming onto pit road, similar to Daniel Suarez, I suppose, although Suarez wasn't pitting. It was at that same part of a track. I was actually kind of surprised that they threw the caution as quickly as they did for Suarez, but then he ended up getting stuck in the grass. So I suppose a caution would have been necessary there. But it is frustrating that we had the overtime and it didn't play out as naturally as it could have. But still, a great run for Riley Herbst to be able to come back from his incident and place him in the top 10 today.
Yeah, for sure. And I was very surprised that Ryan Blaney got a top 10 after everything he went through in his race, getting in one of the biggest wrecks we saw today, having a damaged car. It wasn't as fast as it was, and still caught damage in that final crash, and somehow finished and the top 10. I have no idea how he did it, but hey, a pretty good points day for the number 12 Ford Mustang from Team Penske, and Suarez as well, getting the top 10. That was very surprising since he had, brought up one of the final cautions. AJ Allmendinger at one point towards the end, I wonder where in the world did he come from, because AJ he early in the race, I'm sure y'all saw that big block he put on the pack, and turned out to work out well for him, because he was able to stay ahead of Bubba Wallace and get the free pass, get back on the lead lap. AJ ended up having a really great day, and I think that's the best possible result that Kaulig racing could have needed, because it's been a really difficult week for Kaulig racing. They had a really rough time in single car qualifying. They weren't fast at all. The duels didn't go particularly well. Chandler Smith not making the Daytona 500, and for AJ Allmendinger to get top 10, really good for him. And Riley Herbst, as Casey mentioned, he had that spin early, and also had a penalty as well on pit road. So he overcame two different things to come back and get a top 10 finish in his NASCAR Cup Series debut. So kudos to all of them.
Yeah, and I can agree with pretty much any driver kind of from 6 through 10 shocked me, just because of what had happened today with all of the incidents. I think Riley Herbst is the most impressive, solely because he came out of an Xfinity program. He's only 23 years old, makes his NASCAR debut in the Cup Series in the Daytona 500, driving a Rick Ware Racing car. And he goes on from 36th or 38th, whatever I said, to finish in the top 10. That's truly a star moment out of that young man. And I think, like I said, I think he's going to win an Xfinity race this year. I don't know if it'll be a Cup race, but I'm going to say he's my star. And then also from our Casey Campbell, JTG is the first single car team since the Wood Brothers to win the Daytona 500. Very convenient for Ricky Stenhouse Jr., since that year they did win the Daytona 500. He was in one appearance at the Coca-Cola 600, where he finished 11th place in replacement for Trevor Bayne. But I'm going to throw it over to you, Mr. Ben, as we continue on.
Yeah, and Casey also says Christopher Bell picks up his best finish on the super speedway in third. And let's go through, we want to talk about 11th place. Let's go through 11th on back. Now some of the notables that just missed out on the top 10, including Travis Pastrana in 11th, his first Daytona 500, a great result for him in that third 2311 car. Kevin Harvick, 12th in his final Daytona 500, another guy that came back from some damage in an earlier crash. Zane Smith, 13th, Cody Ware, 14th, Martin Truex Jr., 15th, Corey LaJoie, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, Kyle Busch, and Bubba Wallace round out the top 20. Busch went from leading at the end of 500 miles to 19th. He did tweet about that as well, said it's a shame it wasn't 1998, because otherwise we'd be talking about him as a Daytona 500 winner right now. but he did have an eventful race coming from the back, a speeding penalty. After he came from the back, had to come from the back again in the wall, running up front until the mayhem occurred in overtime. So, Matthew, I'll start with you. I know that it's very early in the season, but has Kyle Busch rightfully silenced the doubters that said going to RCR was going to be a step back?
I think it's definitely too early, but I think in any professional sport, motorsport, for instance, when you have this talent, free agent, who's arguably, like I said, probably the greatest to ever do it, in at least most recent memory, go to any team, just like his brother. Any team that Kurt Busch went to got better. So for the haters or whatever, doubters, whatever you want to call them, saying that RCR took a step back, or it would be a step back, you could argue that they had a point because Joe Gibbs Racing is the best Toyota team. RCR was second or third on the Chevrolet side of things. So maybe, but I mean, Kyle, but it's a 19th place finish at the end of the day, though. So I don't, maybe if he crossed the finish line like it would be 1998, would he have the 3 under the number 8 if you saw the test scheme of the backup car? Still, you still had the 3 riding with them. So Kyle Busch won the Daytona 500, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr. won the Daytona 530 that ultimately ended the race. But I think this might give a hint at what's to come for Kyle Busch, not with the finish, but where he ran all day. I would be surprised if Kyle Busch doesn't continue his win streak to make history and win at least 1 or 2 races this season. So I'm going to say this is slowly silencing the doubters, but in a few weeks, we're going to have this conversation when they're officially silenced.
Yeah, and so far, the 2 races we've seen so far in 2023, it's like clashing in Daytona 500. RCRs look really strong in both. So I think Kyle Busch can definitely do a lot of great things with Richard Childress Racing this season. And I remember when it was announced that he'd be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing and going to RCR, as we've been saying, a lot of people thought that this was a huge step in the wrong direction, that he wouldn't be able to do all of the same things he was doing during his time with Joe Gibbs Racing. And if 2 races is a little indication of what's to come, I think RCR has to be really excited and what Kyle Busch can bring to the organization this year. He could really help take them back to, the glory days of RCR, where he can bring the 8 car, to a deep playoff run and contending for race wins every week and championships as well. I think RCR is really going to benefit from all the knowledge and everything Kyle Busch brings to an organization. And I think Kyle Busch is really fired up, and he feels like he has a chip on his shoulder and something to prove that Joe Gibbs Racing made a mistake by letting him go and replacing him with young Ty Gibbs. And Adam Lemery says that he believes that Kyle Busch will win at RCR this year. I agree with you, Adam. I think Kyle Busch will win for Richard Childress Racing as well.
And I will go a step further, and I think Austin Dillon will win for RCR this year as well. I think the entire organization is going to get a boost from Kyle Busch going over there. Casey Campbell also says, Mike Kelly, I just saw this on Twitter, actually. Mike Kelly wins his 2nd Daytona 500. He was Michael Waltrip's car chief back in 2001, and noting also that there was obviously no celebration that year based on what happened with Dale Earnhardt on the final lap. He gets to fully celebrate it this time in 2023. Casey also says it had been 207 races since Ricky Stenhouse Jr. last won, of course, back at Daytona in 2017. So I'm sure he's going to thoroughly enjoy this win as well. Now, in terms of winning this season, there's been an interesting trend going on that we've picked up on with Daytona 500 winners since 2016. The only driver to win the Daytona 500 since 2016 and then go on to win at least one more race in the same season is Denny Hamlin, who's done it 3 times in 2016, 2019, and 2020. Kurt Busch won the 2017 Daytona 500. That was his only win that season. Same with Austin Dillon in 2018, Michael McDowell in 2021, and Austin Cindric in 2022. So, Kobe, I'll start with you here. Do you predict that the trend continues with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., or will he be able to emulate Denny Hamlin's success following the Daytona 500 and win 1, maybe even 2 or 3 more races this season?
Well, Ben, I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. could potentially win another race this season. Maybe on the super speedways, or maybe he'll surprise us like he did last year. He was in contention at some tracks. Not a super speedway. Ricky's a really good dirt racer, so we could see him do really well at Bristol Dirt. I believe I even picked him in pick a winner last year or the year before last to win that race. So that's another track we could see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. win at. And And the comment in the chat room about Mike Kelly. Mike Kelly is back with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He was also the crew chief when Ricky won those back Xfinity Series championships as well. So it'll be exciting to see what Ricky and Mike Kelly will be able to do in 2023.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I think when you have your Super Bowl at the start of your season, usually in other professional sports, the best the best team, best athlete usually wins the championship, wins that Super Bowl. But in NASCAR, I think the great thing about it is you could have a driver who hasn't won in 6 years win it. And that's just an incredible feat. And discussing, if you look at the next gen car as well, and if you count even Ryan Blaney, Truex's Clash wins and stuff, we've had like 23, 24 different winners in the next gen car since the start of last season, including the exhibition races as well. Then if you count Almirola too, like pretty much 25 of the 36 chartered entries have won now in this car, whether it counted or not. So I think that's just an incredible thing. I don't think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I think he'll continue the trend. I don't think he'll win again, but I think he has a better shot than some of the guys. Like, I think he overall had a better team and he was a better driver than Michael McDowell when he won it. I was surprised that Austin Cindric didn't win again after being so well at the road courses. I was trying to think. Austin Cindric's a great driver. That's why I was trying to think what tracks he did well at. But I think this trend does continue. I think that was a great question by you guys. I don't think Stenhouse wins again this season, but it would be pretty darn cool if he did, and if it wasn't at a super speedway, because he's one of those drivers, like I had mentioned, great super speedway driver, but unfortunately I didn't mention any other track because Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I don't believe, since his nationwide days at the time, has won on a non-super speedway. So, I mean, still very happy for him, but I think he'll continue that trend that Denny Hamlin seems to be the only one who won't follow it.
I actually had a friend in a group chat of mine call him the modern day Michael Waltrip. And, thinking back to their wins in their Cup Series careers, if Stenhouse can get a second Daytona 500, they'd have the exact same win record. They'd have a win at Talladega, they'd have a win in the summer Daytona race, and they'd have 2 Daytona 500 wins. So we'll see if Ricky can pull that off or break that trend and get a couple more wins this season or next season. Who knows what's going to happen with him and that JTG Daugherty team. But Matthew, I'll hand it over to you now for our One Shining Moment segment.
Absolutely. So this is one of my favorite parts of our Grid Network team is to do the One Shining Moment. I'm more of a pre-race show, not a post-race guy, so I'm very excited to lead it. I think we had a great Daytona 500 day, longest Daytona 500 technically in the history of the sport in terms of mileage with the 530. So I'm going to start with you, Kobe. What was your one shining moment from our Super Bowl here today?
Well, Matthew, I'm actually gonna do two one shining moments. One from the Daytona 500, and one from the Speed Week in general. My first one shining moment. I know they're gonna talk about it tomorrow on Grid Live Encore with Ben and the gang. How about Greg Van Alst winning that ARCA race? That was such an incredible moment. A small underfunded team, going up against the big dogs of ARCA. Joe Gibbs, any motorsports, and he got the job done. Heck, Jason White, who was driving for a small team as well, could have won the race. Greg Niles, that was a great run. He timed it perfectly, and he was at the right place at the right time and got it done and gave a tribute saying, this is for all the short track racers who never thought you could do this at this level of motorsports. Yeah, Greg Van Alst has worked really, really hard to get to this point, and really it's nice to see, one of the true underdogs, one of the good guys really get the job done at the end, win at the World Center Racing, the day he'll never ever forget. I really love seeing the raw emotion that Greg Van Alst showed after he won the race. And my great one shining moment from this weekend is gonna be JTG Daugherty Racing. Overall making history. Jody Gushaker, Brad Daugherty becoming the first co-owners to win the 500, making history. That's just such an incredible thing. Nice thing to see. And Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for getting a crown jewel victory as well. And so Adam Limmery said his one shining moment was Travis Pastrana finishing 11. That's very, very impressive for Travis Pastrana. and because I'm sure a lot of people never expected that he would be able to finish up this high, but he ran a really smart race. Didn't make any major mistakes, and although he ended up crashing at the end, he still did a really solid job, and he should be proud of it.
I think tomorrow's one shining moment on the Encore show might be unanimous. I think everybody is just over the moon for Greg Van Alsten, what that team was able to pull off yesterday in the ARCA race. But since I'm on the Encore show, I host the Encore show, I will save the Xfinity Truck and ARCA one shining moment candidates for that show tomorrow. Kobe, I think I'll just agree with you. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., it's been a long time coming for him. I'm going to make that my one shining moment. And not only him, but JTG Daugherty Racing as well. I hesitate to call them a back marker, but I do think that they do lack some of the funding of some of the bigger teams, and certainly haven't had as much success or been able to enjoy as much success as some of the more notable teams in this sport. So I've got to tip my hat to them and give them my one shining moment as well. I guess I took Casey's one shining moment as well. Casey, you got to be on the air. We got to have you here I see you've been very active in the chat room tonight. Thanks for that. But yeah, feel free to, I took Kobe's one shining moment. So who's to say we can't share the same one shining moment here? So, it's a great moment. I think it deserves a mention.
Definitely. And then, yeah, for you, Casey, I mean, we could just move me this way and you could be right over here or right over here. It all depends. But I mean, that is definitely the one shining moment, but I am just not going to be repetitive in this case with you guys. I'm going to go with, out of the 40 drivers in this NASCAR Cup Series field today, 2 of them made their NASCAR Cup Series debuts. And those drivers finished in 10th and 11th with Riley Herbst and Travis Pastrana. I think what they did today, and I mean, we could say Travis Pastrana, the greatest in his discipline. He's also led 2 laps of the Daytona 500. So Travis Pastrana really exceeded his own expectations. So that's why he's one of my one shining moments. And then Riley Herbst doing what he did with that Rick Ware Racing Sunny D Dash Monster Energy was hiding there, but it was there. Definitely those 2. I was going to say young men, but I think Travis Pastrana is a little bit on the older side of things. But yeah, I think those 2 finishing 10th and 11th was my one shining moment, but not to take anything away from the whole JT Daugherty team. I think that's definitely number 1, but I'm going to put mine at number 2 for you guys today.
Yeah, another Daytona 500 in the books, and next week gonna be heading to Auto Club Speedway in Fontana for the final race on the big oval, which is really disappointing. I'm sure a lot of people are really gonna miss that track. It's a great track, multiple grooves. It's put on some really great racing and finishes over the years. We're really sad to see it go. So we're probably gonna have a sad encore show. I mean, not encore, a sad wrap up show next week. And for only the second time this year, nobody correctly guessed pick a winner. Third year in a row, the Daytona 500 had no one correctly predict the winner as well for our pick a winner game. And on Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, Grit Live Encore will react to everything that happened at Daytona and ARCA Trucks and Xfinity. Listen to our latest episode of Life on the Grid. Ben and I interviewed assistant producer from Dirty Mo Media, Ben Walton, who works on the Speak Street podcast with Connor Daly, who finished 29th today in his first Daytona 500, and he's on there with comedian Joey Molinaro. Link in the video description below. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoyed both of our programs today, Daytona 500 pre-race and wrap-up shows. Thank you to everyone who subscribed, following our successful weekend of Rolex 24 coverage, helping us reach our goal of 500 subscribers before the Daytona 500, and now we're on the road to 600. Now let's see if we can reach our new ambitious goal of 1,000 subscribers before the Indy 500 on May 28th. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notifications. Follow all our social media platforms and visit gridranking.com. Take 5 minutes to invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Join Colin, Mark, Dushel, and Robin and invest in each month in the Grid Network. Welcome to our newest Patreon supporter, David. We're really excited to have you join this amazing group of people who really keep us on the air. And once we hit $500 per month, we can begin sending members of our team to the track more consistently for live reports from the track and more content. Linked in the video description. If you want to do a one-time donation, click the link to buy me a coffee, and you can get your name on the board and invest as much as you can. We had a couple of people use buy me a coffee earlier today, and thank you all so much for doing that. Really appreciate that. And you can even buy a drink for your favorite on-air talent here at Grit Network, or just anyone or just Grit Network in general, and we'll all thank you on the air because we really appreciate your continued support. For Matthew Bro and Ben Snyder, I'm Kobe Lambert from The Podium Finish. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.